The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Kensington Palace as Prince Louis walked through the corridors he had known since childhood. At 23, he carried himself with the grace expected of royalty, yet something weighed heavily on his shoulders today. The servants noticed his quieter demeanor, the way he paused longer than usual at the portraits of his ancestors that lined the grand hallway. Louis had always been different from his older siblings. Where Prince William was groomed for kingship and Prince Harry had found his calling in military service and charity work, Louis seemed to drift between expectations and his own desires. The public knew him as the spare to the spare, the third son who attended state functions with a practiced smile but rarely spoke at length to the media. Today marked the 10th anniversary of their mother's death. Princess Diana's legacy lived on through her sons, but Louis felt he had never truly found his way to honor her memory in a meaningful way. His brothers had established foundations, championed causes, and made their mark on the world. Louis had attended university, participated in ceremonial duties, and tried various charitable endeavors, but nothing felt authentic to who he truly was. The palace staff had grown accustomed to Louis's restless energy. He would often disappear for hours, walking through Hyde Park or sitting in quiet corners of the palace gardens. Mrs. Henderson, who had been with the family since Louis was a boy, noticed how he would stop to talk with the groundskeepers, the kitchen staff, and the security personnel. Unlike his brothers, who maintained appropriate royal distance, Louis seemed genuinely interested in the lives of ordinary people. Sarah Morrison worked in the palace kitchen. She was 25, had grown up in a council flat in East London, and had worked her way up from a dishwasher to assistant chef through sheer determination and talent. Her shift started at 5 each morning, preparing meals for the royal household and their guests. She had been working at the palace for 3 years and had maybe exchanged a dozen words with any member of the royal family. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in October. Louis had been unable to sleep and found himself wandering the palace at dawn. He smelled fresh bread baking and followed the aroma to the kitchen. Sarah was alone, kneading dough for the morning rolls, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, flour dusting her apron. "That smells incredible," Louis said from the doorway. Sarah nearly dropped the dough. She had never seen any of the royals in the kitchen before, especially not at 5:30 in the morning. She quickly wiped her hands and attempted a curtsy. "Your Royal Highness, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were awake. Can I prepare something for you?" Louis stepped into the warm kitchen. "Please, don't apologize. I couldn't sleep. Mind if I watch? I've always wondered how you make bread that tastes so much better than anywhere else." For the next hour, Sarah showed Louis the technique her grandmother had taught her. He asked genuine questions, listened intently, and even tried his hand at kneading the dough. They talked about the simple pleasure of creating something with your hands, about Sarah's grandmother who had raised her, about Louis's struggles with finding purpose. "You know," Sarah said as she shaped the final loaves, "my Nan always said that bread is like life. You need the right ingredients, patience, and a bit of love to make it work. But even when it doesn't turn out perfect, it can still nourish someone." Louis found himself returning to the kitchen every few days. Always early, before the formal day began. Sarah would have coffee ready, and they would talk while she prepared the day's bread. She told him about her childhood, how her mother had struggled with addiction, how her grandmother had worked 3 jobs to keep Sarah in school. Louis shared his own struggles with finding his place in a family where roles were predetermined. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just taking up space," Louis confessed one morning. "William will be king someday. Harry found his purpose in the military and his charity work. I attend openings and cut ribbons, but what difference am I actually making?" Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places. You talk to people here like they matter. Do you know how rare that is? Most important people just look through us like we're furniture." Their friendship deepened over months. Louis would arrive with books Sarah had mentioned wanting to read. Sarah would save him samples of new recipes she was testing. They discovered they both loved old films, hiking, and had complicated relationships with their family's expectations. Neither acknowledged what was clearly becoming more than friendship. The gulf between their worlds seemed insurmountable. Louis was bound by centuries of protocol and tradition. Sarah knew her place and respected the boundaries of class and position. The turning point came on New Year's Eve. The palace was hosting a formal dinner for visiting dignitaries. Sarah was working late, helping prepare the elaborate meal. As she carried a tray of dishes to the service area, she slipped on a patch of spilled water. The china crashed to the floor, and Sarah fell hard on her wrist. Louis happened to be walking by and heard the crash. He found Sarah sitting among the broken dishes, tears in her eyes, cradling her injured wrist. "Are you hurt?" He knelt beside her, carefully examining her wrist. "I'm fine. I'm so sorry about the dishes. Mrs. Whitman is going to be furious. I can't afford to lose this job." Louis helped her to her feet. "Don't worry about the dishes. Let's get you to the medical officer." As he walked with her to get medical attention, Louis realized something had fundamentally shifted in his heart. This wasn't just concern for a friend. He had fallen in love with this remarkable woman who worked harder than anyone he knew, who had overcome challenges he could barely imagine, who treated him like a person rather than a title. Dr. Matthews, the palace physician, determined that Sarah had sprained her wrist badly and would need several days of rest. Louis insisted on personally ensuring she got home safely and had everything she needed. "You don't need to do this," Sarah protested as Louis helped her into a palace car. "Yes, I do," Louis said quietly. "You matter to me, Sarah. More than you know." Over the next few days, Louis visited Sarah at her small flat in East London. He saw where she had grown up, met some of her neighbors, and began to understand the world she came from. Sarah's flat was tiny but immaculately clean. Photos of her grandmother covered one wall, and books were stacked everywhere because she couldn't afford proper shelves. "This is who I really am," Sarah said, somewhat embarrassed by the modest surroundings. "I can see that," Louis replied. "It's beautiful. It's real." They spent those days talking more honestly than ever before. Sarah spoke about her dreams of opening her own bakery someday, of creating a place where people from her neighborhood could come for good food and community. Louis talked about feeling trapped by expectation, about wanting to do work that actually helped people rather than just representing an institution. When Sarah returned to work, everything felt different. They continued their early morning conversations, but now there was an underlying tension, an acknowledgement of feelings neither dared speak aloud. The crisis came in March when a tabloid photographer somehow captured a photo of Louis leaving Sarah's building early one morning. The picture was grainy and didn't clearly show them together, but the speculation began immediately. Who was the young woman? Why was Prince Louis visiting council flats in East London? Palace security increased around both Louis and Sarah. Reporters began asking questions at the palace. Mrs. Whitman, the head of household staff, called Sarah into her office. "I don't know what's been going on," Mrs. Whitman said carefully, "but you need to understand that any inappropriate relationship between staff and the royal family is grounds for immediate dismissal. More than that, it could cause serious problems for His Royal Highness." Sarah felt her world crashing down. She had always known this day might come, but she hadn't prepared for how much it would hurt. That evening, she left a note for Louis in their usual meeting place. "I can't do this anymore. It's not fair to either of us. Please don't try to contact me." When Louis found the note the next morning, he felt something break inside his chest. He had never experienced heartbreak before, had never realized how physical emotional pain could be. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to lose something that truly mattered. For weeks, Louis went through the motions of his royal duties. He attended functions, met with charity representatives, and fulfilled his obligations. But the staff noticed the change in him. The easy smile was gone, replaced by a polite mask. He stopped his early morning walks through the palace, stopped engaging with the staff he had always chatted with. Sarah requested a transfer to the Windsor Castle kitchen. She couldn't bear working in the same building, knowing Louis was somewhere nearby but completely out of reach. The head chef at Windsor was known for his excellent training program, so the transfer was approved without suspicion. Louis learned of her transfer through Mrs. Henderson, who mentioned it casually while discussing staffing changes. He felt as if Sarah had died. The knowledge that she was gone, that he might never see her again, was almost unbearable. Spring turned to summer, and Louis threw himself into royal duties with an intensity that surprised everyone. He took on more charity work, traveled extensively for trade missions, and seemed determined to prove his worth through sheer volume of activity. But, late at night, alone in his apartments, Louis would think about Sarah's words about bread and life. About patience, the right ingredients, and love making all the difference. He began to understand that his heartbreak was teaching him something important about what he valued, about what kind of life he wanted to live. The media speculation about his mystery woman eventually died down, replaced by other royal news. But Louis knew that something fundamental had changed in him. He had experienced real love, real loss, and real purpose. The question now was what he would do with those experiences. In quiet moments, he would remember Sarah's laugh, the way she looked when she was concentrating on her baking, the warmth in her voice when she spoke about her dreams. He began to understand that love didn't always mean possession. Sometimes it meant letting go. But it also meant carrying the best parts of that love forward into whatever came next. Louis started volunteering at community centers in East London, working with young people who reminded him of Sarah's strength and determination. He began to see a path forward, a way to honor what she had taught him about genuine connection with people whose struggles were real and immediate. The palace staff noticed that while Louis seemed sadder, he also seemed more focused, more purposeful. The aimless wandering had been replaced by determined action. Whatever had happened during those months had changed him from a restless young man into someone with clear convictions about how he wanted to spend his life. Mrs. Henderson, who had watched Louis grow up, could see that he was grieving something significant. But she also recognized that grief was teaching him lessons that years of privilege and protocol never could. He was becoming the man he was meant to be, shaped by love and loss in equal measure. 2 years passed before Louis saw Sarah again. He had built a new life around his charity work in East London, spending 3 days a week at community centers and youth programs. The work felt meaningful in a way that traditional royal duties never had. He was helping young people find job training, supporting families in crisis, and slowly building the kind of connections his mother had been famous for. Louis had learned to carry his grief quietly. He dated occasionally women from appropriate backgrounds who understood royal protocol. But none of these relationships progressed beyond polite dinners and charity functions. His family worried that he was becoming too serious, too withdrawn from the social activities expected of a young royal. The morning that changed everything started like any other. Louis was visiting the new community kitchen project in Whitechapel, a program that provided job training for unemployed youth and free meals for local families. The kitchen had been his idea, inspired by memories of watching Sarah work with such skill and passion. He arrived early to meet with the program coordinator and review applications from young people hoping to join the next training cycle. As he walked through the kitchen, checking the equipment and preparation areas, he heard a familiar voice giving instructions to a group of teenagers. Remember, timing is everything in a professional kitchen. Start with your mise en place, get everything prepared and organized. That way, when the orders start coming, you can focus on cooking rather than searching for ingredients. Louis froze. He knew that voice, had dreamed about it countless times. Slowly, he moved toward the sound, and there she was. Sarah stood at the main prep station, demonstrating knife skills to 6 eager students. She wore chef's whites and had her hair pulled back in the same practical style he remembered. She looked older, more confident, but unmistakably herself. For a moment, Louis simply watched. Sarah was a natural teacher, patient and encouraging but also demanding excellence from her students. She had achieved her dream of working in a professional kitchen, though not in the way either of them had once imagined. One of the teenagers noticed Louis first. "Miss Morrison, there's someone here to see you." Sarah looked up, and their eyes met across the kitchen. The mixing bowl in her hands trembled slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Class, please continue practicing your knife cuts. I'll be right back." Her voice was steady, professional. They walked to a quiet corner of the kitchen, both unsure how to bridge the gap of 2 years and a world of unspoken hurt. "Hello, Sarah." "Your Royal Highness." The formal address felt like a wall between them. "I didn't know you were working here." "I'm sorry, I can leave if this is uncomfortable." Sarah looked at him carefully. Louis appeared older, more serious. The boyish uncertainty she remembered had been replaced by something more solid, more purposeful. "No, it's fine. I heard you were funding this program. It's wonderful what you're doing here." They stood in awkward silence, both remembering their last conversation, the note she had left, the choice she had made to protect them both. "How have you been?" Louis asked. "Good. Busy. I completed my culinary degree last year. The head chef at Windsor helped me get a recommendation for this position." She paused. You look well. Do I? Louis smiled sadly. I've been learning a lot about myself these past 2 years. About what really matters. Before Sarah could respond, one of her students called out. Miss Morrison, I think I'm doing this wrong. Duty calls, she said, and Louis could see relief in her eyes at the interruption. Of course. I should let you get back to your class. As Louis turned to leave, Sarah spoke quietly. Louis. It was the first time she had used his name in years. Thank you for creating this program. These kids, they need opportunities like this. You're changing lives here. Louis looked back at her. I learned from someone very wise that we all need the right ingredients, patience, and love to make something worthwhile. I'm just trying to provide some of the ingredients. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she simply nodded and returned to her students. Louis left the kitchen with his heart racing. Seeing Sarah again had awakened feelings he thought he had successfully buried. But it had also shown him how much they had both grown. She had become the chef and teacher she was meant to be. He had found his calling in service that felt authentic rather than obligatory. Over the following weeks, Louis found himself returning to the community kitchen more frequently than necessary. He told himself it was important to monitor the program closely, to ensure the funding was being used effectively. But, truthfully, he wanted to be near Sarah, to see the life she had built for herself. Sarah was equally affected by Louis's presence. She had worked hard to build a life that didn't revolve around missing him. But, seeing him again, watching him interact with the students and staff with genuine warmth and interest, reminded her why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. The kitchen program was thriving. The teenagers were learning real skills and several had already been placed in jobs at restaurants around London. Sarah's reputation as a teacher was growing, and she had been asked to develop curriculum for similar programs across the city. One evening, as the last students were leaving, Louis lingered to help with cleanup. It had become a pattern over the past month, this informal time when they could talk more freely. The Henderson twins are really improving, Louis said, washing pans while Sarah organized ingredients for the next day. James especially. He has natural talent but needed confidence. Sometimes that's harder to teach than technique. They worked in comfortable rhythm, the ease between them returning despite everything that had happened. Sarah, Louis said finally, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. She stopped what she was doing, sensing the seriousness in his voice. When you left that note 2 years ago, was it really because you thought it was best for both of us, or was it because you didn't think I was worth the risk? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. It was because I loved you too much to watch the press destroy you. Your family, your future, your purpose in life, they're all tied to your position. I couldn't be the reason you lost that. And, now I see what you've built here. This work, it's who you really are. You found your purpose. I found it because of you, Louis said quietly. Everything I learned about connecting with people, about seeing beyond titles and status, I learned from watching you. You didn't destroy my future, Sarah. You helped me discover it. Sarah turned to face him fully. Louis, what are you saying? I'm saying that I spent 2 years trying to convince myself that loving you was a mistake, a phase, something I needed to get over. But, seeing you here, watching you with these students, I realize I was wrong. Loving you wasn't the mistake. Letting you go was. Sarah's hands were trembling now. Louis, nothing has changed. I'm still a commoner who works in a kitchen. You're still a prince. The obstacles that separated us before are still there. Everything has changed, Louis said, moving closer to her. I've changed. I know who I am now, what I want my life to look like. I want to spend it doing work that matters, with someone who understands what that means. The press, your family, the public, they would never accept it. Then, we'll deal with that together. Sarah, I've dated appropriate women for 2 years. I've tried to be the prince everyone expected me to be. But, I can't pretend anymore that my heart isn't already taken. Sarah was crying now, torn between hope and fear. I've built a good life here. I can't go back to hiding, to secret meetings and living in fear of discovery. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that we can figure this out together. Before Sarah could respond, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Mrs. Patterson, the community center director, appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Oh, excuse me. I was just checking that everything was locked up. Prince Louis, I didn't expect you to still be here." "Just helping with cleanup," Louis said smoothly. "Sarah runs an excellent program here." Mrs. Patterson beamed. "She certainly does. We're so fortunate to have her." "Well, don't stay too late. The neighborhood isn't the safest after dark." After Mrs. Patterson left, the moment between Louis and Sarah felt different, more fragile. "I should go," Sarah said, gathering her things. "Sarah, please. Think about what I said." "I have thought about it. For 2 years, I've thought about little else. But thinking and doing are different things." Louis reached for her hand. "Then, let's stop thinking and start doing. Have dinner with me. Not as a prince and a commoner, not as employer and employee. Just as Louis and Sarah, two people who care about each other." Sarah looked down at their joined hands. "One dinner. One dinner. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she looked up at him. "There's a little Italian place near my flat. Nothing fancy, but the owner makes the best pasta in London." Louis smiled, really smiled, for the first time in 2 years. "I'd love that." They made plans to meet the following Saturday evening. As they walked to their respective cars, both were nervous about what they were risking. But, for the first time since that morning when everything fell apart, they both felt hope. The days leading up to their dinner seemed to last forever. Louis found himself distracted during royal engagements, thinking about what he would say to Sarah, how he would convince her that they could make a relationship work despite all the obstacles. Sarah was equally distracted at work. The students noticed their teacher seemed happier but also more anxious. She caught herself humming while she worked, something she hadn't done since before she left Kensington Palace. Saturday evening arrived grey and drizzly, typical London spring weather. Louis chose his clothes carefully, wanting to look nice but not ostentatious. He settled on dark jeans and a simple sweater, clothes that wouldn't draw attention in Sarah's neighborhood. The restaurant Sarah had chosen was exactly what she had described, a small family-run place with mismatched tables and the smell of garlic and herbs filling the air. Louis arrived first and chose a corner table where they could talk privately. When Sarah walked in, Louis felt his breath catch. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and had left her hair down around her shoulders. She looked beautiful, but, more than that, she looked happy in a way he hadn't seen since their early morning conversations in the palace kitchen. "I'm not late, am I?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "Perfect timing. I ordered wine, I hope that's okay." "More than okay. I think I'm going to need it." They both laughed nervously, and some of the tension eased. Over pasta and wine, they talked like they used to, easily and honestly. Sarah told Louis about her students, about the ones who struggled and the ones who excelled, about her hopes for expanding the program. Louis talked about the other projects he was funding, his plans to establish similar programs in other parts of London. "You've really found your calling," Sarah said, watching the passion in his eyes as he talked about his work. "I keep thinking about what you said about bread. About needing the right ingredients, patience, and love. That's what these programs are, really. We're providing some of the ingredients, but the young people have to do the work themselves." "And love?" Louis looked at her directly. "I think the love part is about believing in people, seeing their potential even when they can't see it themselves." "You taught me that." As the evening progressed, they both relaxed. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on their shared memories, their separate journeys over the past 2 years, and, tentatively, carefully, their feelings for each other. "I never stopped loving you," Louis said as they shared dessert. "I tried, but I couldn't." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I couldn't either. So where does that leave us?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Scared," she said finally. "But maybe scared together is better than safe and alone." Louis reached across the table and took her hand. "Maybe it is." As they left the restaurant, both knew they were stepping into uncertain territory. The obstacles that had separated them before still existed. The press, the palace, the centuries of protocol that governed royal relationships. But they also knew that some things were worth the risk. "I don't want to rush this," Sarah said as they stood on the street corner where they would part ways.
"Neither do I. We have time to figure things out."
Louis kissed her forehead gently.
"Thank you for giving us another chance. Thank you for not giving up on us."
As Louis drove back to Kensington Palace and Sarah walked home to her flat, both felt something they hadn't experienced in 2 years: hope for a future that included each other. 6 months into their renewed relationship, Louis and Sarah had developed a careful rhythm. They met regularly but discreetly, often at charity events or community programs where their professional relationship provided natural cover. They had dinner at small restaurants in neighborhoods where paparazzi rarely ventured. They took long walks in Richmond Park early in the morning before the world was awake. Their love had deepened but also become more realistic. They both understood the challenges they faced, and they spent time discussing how to navigate them.
Sarah had been reading about royal history, studying how other members of the family had handled unconventional relationships.
Louis had begun carefully sounding out trusted advisors about public opinion and constitutional questions. The turning point came on a cold December evening. Louis had been invited to a state dinner at Buckingham Palace for the visiting Canadian Prime Minister. It was exactly the kind of formal event that Sarah could never attend, a reminder of the world that remained close to her. Louis sat through the elaborate dinner, making polite conversation with diplomats and politicians, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Sarah, who was probably at home reading or working on new curriculum for the kitchen program.
The contrast between these two worlds felt starker than ever. After dinner, as guests moved to the blue drawing room for coffee and informal conversation, King William pulled Louis aside.
"You seem distracted tonight."
"Just tired, I suppose."
William studied his younger brother carefully. "Louis, I know we don't talk about personal matters often, but I'm concerned about you. You've seemed different these past few months. Happier in some ways, but also more distant from family events." Louis felt his heart rate increase.
"I'm fine, William. Just focused on my charity work. Is there something you need to tell me? Someone you've been seeing?"
The direct question hung in the air between them. Louis had always known this conversation would come eventually, but he hadn't expected it tonight, in the middle of a state function.
"Can we talk about this later? Privately?"
"Of course. But, Louis, whatever it is, I hope you know you can trust me."
"We're family first, everything else second."
The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Louis.
He knew the time for secrecy was ending.
Either he would have to end his relationship with Sarah, or he would have to find the courage to tell his family the truth. The next morning, Louis called Sarah and asked if he could come over. She could hear the tension in his voice and agreed immediately. When he arrived at her flat, Sarah took one look at his face and knew something significant had happened.
"What is it?"
Louis told her about the conversation with William, about the growing pressure to explain his behavior, about the impossibility of continuing to keep their relationship secret much longer.
"So what are you saying?" Sarah asked quietly. "I'm saying we have a choice.
We can end this now, before it gets more complicated.
Or we can move forward together, knowing that means dealing with everything we've been avoiding."
Sarah was quiet for a long time.
"What does moving forward look like?" "It means I tell my family about us. It means we stop hiding. It means facing whatever comes next together." "And if your family forbids it?
If the press destroys us?
If you lose your position in the line of succession?" Louis took her hands in his.
"Then, we'll deal with that too."
"Sarah, I've spent my whole life trying to be the prince everyone expected me to be.
But the only time I've ever felt like myself, like the man I want to be, is when I'm with you."
Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she had grown up.
"My whole life, I've been careful not to reach for things that weren't meant for me. I've worked hard, kept my head down, and been grateful for what I had.
And now? Now I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of pretending I don't love you.
I'm tired of hiding who I am and what I want." Louis stood and joined her at the window.
"So we move forward?" "We move forward." They spent the rest of the day making plans.
Louis would speak to William first, privately, then to their father. Sarah would talk to her closest friends and colleagues, preparing them for the attention that would inevitably come. 3 days later, Louis requested a private meeting with King William. They met in William's study at Kensington Palace, the same room where their father had once called them to discuss their mother's death. "I'm in love," Lewis said without preamble. "Have been for 3 years." William set down the papers he had been reading.
"I see. Anyone I know?"
"She works at the community kitchen program I fund in Whitechapel."
"Her name is Sarah Morrison."
William was quiet for a moment.
"Tell me about her." For the next hour, Lewis talked about Sarah.
Her background, her work, her character, her dreams. He told William about their first meeting in the palace kitchen, about how she had changed his understanding of service and purpose. He was honest about the challenges they would face but clear about his commitment to her.
"You understand the complications this creates," William said finally. "I do. The press will be brutal.
They'll investigate every aspect of her background, her family, her past. They'll look for anything they can use to discredit her."
"Sarah knows that. We've discussed it extensively." "And the constitutional questions? The Church of England's position on royal marriages?"
"We're prepared to address those issues as they arise."
William leaned back in his chair. "Do you love her enough to give up your titles if necessary? Your place in the succession? Your role in the family?"
Lewis had known this question would come, but hearing it aloud still sent a chill through him.
"I hope it doesn't come to that.
But, yes, if forced to choose, I would choose her." William studied his brother carefully.
"You've changed, Lewis. There's a certainty about you that wasn't there before."
"She's made me a better man."
"I'd like to meet her." Lewis felt a surge of hope. "Really?"
"Really.
If she's important to you, she's important to me. But, Lewis, I need you to understand something. Once this becomes public, there's no going back. The scrutiny will be intense and permanent. Are you both prepared for that?" "We'll have to be." William stood and embraced his brother. "Then, let's figure out how to do this right." The meeting with King Charles was scheduled for the following week. Lewis spent the intervening days with Sarah, preparing her for what was coming. They discussed strategies for dealing with media attention, the importance of maintaining her work at the community kitchen, and how to protect the people in her life who hadn't asked for royal scrutiny. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked the night before Lewis's meeting with his father. "Really sure? Because once your father knows, there's no going back to the way things were." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The meeting with King Charles took place in his private office at Clarence House. Lewis had requested an hour of his father's time, claiming it was a matter of personal importance. Charles listened without interruption as Lewis explained his relationship with Sarah, much as he had with William. When Lewis finished, his father was quiet for several minutes. "Your mother would have liked her," Charles said finally. Lewis felt tears spring to his eyes. "Do you think so?" "Diana always connected with people who were working to improve their circumstances, who cared more about substance than status." "From what you've told me, Sarah sounds like that kind of person." "She is." Charles stood and walked to the window. "The monarchy has changed significantly in my lifetime, Lewis. When I married your mother, there were fewer options for addressing unconventional situations. Today, we have more flexibility, but also more public scrutiny." "I understand that. Do you? Do you understand that if you marry this young woman, she will be analyzed and criticized for the rest of her life? That every word she speaks, every outfit she wears, every expression on her face will be dissected by the press and the public?" "We've talked about that." Charles turned back to his son. "It's one thing to talk about it, another to live it. Your mother struggled with that pressure for her entire adult life." Lewis nodded solemnly. "Sarah is stronger than she looks. But, I know it won't be easy." "And, you? Are you prepared to defend her when the attacks come?" "Because they will come." "I am." Charles studied his son's face. "I believe you are. You've matured significantly these past few years. The work you're doing in East London, it shows real commitment and understanding. Sarah taught me a lot about connecting with people authentically." "Yes, I imagine she did." Charles returned to his desk. "I'd like to meet her. Informally, privately. If this relationship is going to continue, I need to understand who she is." Louis felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, Father. Don't thank me yet.
I still have concerns about how this will affect the family, the monarchy, your own future. But I'm willing to meet her and see what kind of person she is."
"When?" "Next week. Bring her to tea at Highgrove. Just the three of us." As Louis left Clarence's house, he felt both exhilarated and terrified. The next phase of their relationship was about to begin, and everything would depend on how Sarah handled meeting the King of England. Sarah received the news with characteristic calm. "Tea with the King. Just a normal Tuesday afternoon. He wants to get to know you. William does too. And if they don't approve of me?" Louis took her hands. "Then, we'll figure out our next steps."
"But, Sarah, I think they will approve of you."
"How could they not?" Sarah spent the next week preparing.
She read about royal protocol, practiced proper forms of address, and tried to decide what to wear to have tea with the King of England. More importantly, she thought carefully about how to present herself authentically while respecting the formality of the situation.
The evening before the meeting, Sarah and Louis had dinner at her flat.
She had cooked his favorite meal, the same pasta dish they had shared on their first dinner date after reuniting. "I keep thinking about how surreal this all is," Sarah said. 3 years ago, I was washing dishes in the palace kitchen.
Tomorrow I'm having tea with the king. 3 years ago, I was aimlessly wandering the palace corridors. Tomorrow, the woman I love is meeting my father. Life has a way of surprising us. Are you nervous?" Terrified, Louis admitted. "But, in a good way. This feels like the beginning of something important."
Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these past months, being able to love you openly, it's been the happiest time of my life."
"Mine too. And, if your father decides I'm not suitable?"
"Then, we'll prove him wrong."
Sarah smiled. "I love your confidence."
"I love you," Louis said simply. "Everything else, we'll figure out as we go."
The next morning dawned clear and bright.
Louis picked up Sarah at her flat, and they drove to Highgrove House in comfortable silence. Both were nervous, but both also felt ready for whatever would come next. As they pulled through the gates of the royal estate, Sarah looked at Louis.
"Ready?"
"Ready," he replied. Whatever happened next would determine not just their future together, but the kind of life they would be able to build. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had their commitment to each other. The tea service at Highgrove House was set in the king's private sitting room, an intimate space filled with personal photographs and comfortable furniture that felt more like a family home than a royal residence. Sarah had chosen a simple navy dress and low heels, appropriate but not trying too hard to impress. King Charles greeted them at the door himself, a gesture that both surprised and reassured Sarah. He was shorter than she had expected, with kind eyes and the same gentle manner she had noticed in Louis.
"Miss Morrison, thank you for coming. Louis speaks of you constantly." "Your Majesty, thank you for inviting me." Sarah's curtsy was perfect, practiced but natural. "Please, sit. I thought we could have a proper conversation over tea."
For the first 30 minutes, Charles asked Sarah about her work at the community kitchen.
His questions were thoughtful and showed genuine interest in the program's impact on local families.
Sarah found herself relaxing as she talked about the students, the challenges of teaching knife skills to teenagers, and her hopes for expanding the program. "Louis tells me this work was inspired by your grandmother," Charles said, pouring tea with practiced ease.
"Yes, she raised me.
She worked in kitchens her whole life, always said cooking was about nourishing people's bodies and souls. I try to pass that philosophy on to my students."
"A wise woman. I imagine she was quite proud of your accomplishments." Sarah's eyes softened.
"She died just before I started working at the palace. I think she would have been amazed to see where life has taken me."
Charles studied Sarah as she spoke.
He could see what had attracted his son. She was articulate without being polished, genuine in a way that couldn't be manufactured. There was a strength about her that reminded him of Diana's ability to connect with people from all backgrounds.
"Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you.
Louis has explained your relationship, and I can see that you care deeply for each other. But I need to understand what you envision for your future. Have you thought about what life would be like as a member of this family?"
Sarah set down her teacup carefully. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it, Your Majesty. The honest answer is that it terrifies me. I've seen what the press did to other women who married into the royal family. I know the scrutiny would be intense. Then, why are you willing to consider it? Because I love your son. Because together we've found work that feels meaningful. Because I think we make each other better people.
Charles leaned forward slightly.
The press attention would be just the beginning.
Every charity you support, every public appearance, every private moment that becomes public would be analyzed.
Your family, your background, your past relationships, everything would be scrutinized. Can you handle that? Sarah was quiet for a moment.
I don't know if anyone can really be prepared for that level of attention.
But, I've survived difficult things before.
I lost my parents young, worked my way through school, built a career from nothing. I know how to work hard and stay focused on what matters.
And, what matters to you? Family.
Work that helps people. Being authentic about who I am, even when that's uncomfortable. Louis had remained mostly quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke. Father, Sarah has already shown incredible strength in how she's handled our relationship. When the press first started asking questions 3 years ago, she walked away to protect both of us. When we found each other again, she was honest about her fears but willing to try.
She's not naive about what she'd be taking on.
Charles nodded thoughtfully.
Sarah, I'd like to ask you something that might sound strange. If you could design the perfect life for yourself, with no constraints or expectations, what would it look like? Sarah considered the question seriously.
I would run programs like the one I'm doing now, but bigger. I create opportunities for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to learn skills that could change their lives. I'd work with families to bring communities together around food and shared experiences. And I'd do all of that with someone who understood why that work mattered.
Someone like Louis? Someone exactly like Louis.
Charles smiled for the first time since their conversation had become serious. I can see why my son fell in love with you.
Your Majesty?
You're not trying to become someone else to fit into our world. You're trying to bring your world and ours together in a way that serves something larger than yourselves. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes.
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Charles stood and walked to the window overlooking his gardens. I've been king for less than 3 years, but I've been preparing for this role my entire life. I've seen how the monarchy can adapt and how it can resist change. The question is always whether the change serves the institution and the people it represents. He turned back to face Sarah and Louis. Your relationship, if it becomes public and progresses to marriage, would represent a significant evolution in how the royal family connects with modern Britain. The young woman who worked her way up from a council flat to teach disadvantaged youth, marrying the prince who found his calling in community service.
There's a powerful message in that.
Louis felt his heart racing.
Are you saying you would support us?
I'm saying I want to meet with both of you again, along with William and the palace advisors. If we're going to move forward, we need to do it thoughtfully, with proper preparation and support.
Sarah couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. You would really consider allowing this?
Charles sat back down and looked directly at her. Sarah, the monarchy survives by evolving while maintaining its core purpose. Your story, your character, your commitment to service, they align with the values we're trying to represent.
The question isn't whether you're suitable for Louis.
The question is whether we can create the support system you'll both need to succeed. The rest of the tea passed in a blur of practical discussions. Charles explained the process of preparing for a potential royal engagement, the security considerations, the media strategy that would be needed. He spoke candidly about the challenges but also about the resources and support the family could provide. As they prepared to leave, Charles pulled Sarah aside for a private word. My dear, I want you to think very carefully about what we've discussed today. Once this process begins, your life will never be completely private again.
There's no shame in deciding it's not for you. Sarah looked at him directly.
Your Majesty, I appreciate your honesty and your concern.
But I've already made my decision. I love Louis, and I believe in the work we can do together. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them.
Charles smiled and patted her hand gently. In that case, welcome to the family.
The drive back to London was quiet.
Both Louis and Sarah were processing what had just happened, the magnitude of the king's acceptance and what it meant for their future.
I can't quite believe that just happened, Sarah said finally. My father likes you. Really likes you. I could see it in the way he was talking to you. He's not what I expected. He seems so genuinely interested in people, in the work we're doing. He is.
And, Sarah, when he said welcome to the family, he meant it.
That's not something he would say lightly.
Sarah reached for Louis's hand.
So what happens now?
Now we meet with William and the advisors.
We start preparing for going public. We figure out how to do this right. Are you ready for that?
Louis pulled over and turned to face her.
Sarah Morrison, will you marry me?
The question hung in the air between them.
Sarah felt her breath catch. Are you proposing to me on the side of the A40? I'm proposing to you everywhere.
In the palace kitchen where we met, in your flat where I learned what love really meant, in the community center where we found our purpose, and, yes, on the side of this highway where we just got my father's blessing to build a life together. Sarah was crying now, happy tears that she couldn't control.
Yes.
Of course, yes. Louis reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple, elegant ring.
It was my mother's. Father gave it to me after our conversation last week.
The ring fit perfectly. Sarah looked at it through her tears, understanding the significance of wearing Diana's ring.
She would have loved you, Louis said softly. I hope so. I hope I can honor her memory. You already do.
Every day, in the way you connect with people, in the way you see beyond someone's circumstances to who they really are. They sat in the car for a long time, holding each other, both overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment.
6 months later, the engagement was announced officially.
The palace had spent the intervening time preparing Sarah for public life, working with her on media training, protocol lessons, and security arrangements. They had also carefully crafted the narrative of their relationship, emphasizing their shared commitment to community service and youth development.
The press response was mixed, as expected.
There were critics who questioned Sarah's background and suitability for royal life. But there were also many who celebrated the love story between the prince who had found his calling in service and the young woman who had worked her way up from nothing. Sarah handled the attention with grace and dignity that surprised even the palace staff. She continued her work at the community kitchen, now with royal protection officers' discreet shadows, and spoke eloquently about her hopes for using her new platform to support youth development programs. The wedding was planned for the following spring, a balance between royal tradition and the couple's desire for something more intimate than the massive spectacles of previous royal weddings. 1 month before the wedding, Louis and Sarah returned to the community kitchen where they had found each other again. The students had planned a surprise celebration, with a cake made by James Henderson, the young man who had struggled with confidence but was now enrolled in culinary school.
Thank you, Sarah said to the gathered students and staff. This work, these relationships, they're what matter most to us. Being able to continue this together, that's the real gift.
As the evening wound down, Louis and Sarah found themselves alone in the kitchen where so much of their story had unfolded.
Any regrets? Louis asked.
Sarah looked around at the space where she had taught so many young people, where she had rediscovered her own strength and purpose.
None. This is exactly where we're supposed to be. Even with everything that's coming? The wedding, the media attention, the royal duties?
Sarah smiled and pulled him close. Especially because of all that. We're going to have a platform to help so many more people, to make a real difference.
That's worth any amount of scrutiny.
Louis kissed her forehead gently.
I love you, future Princess Sarah. I love you too. And, Louis? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for being worth the wait.
The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Westminster Abbey was filled with a carefully curated guest list that included heads of state and celebrities, but also students from Sarah's programs, palace staff who had known Louis since childhood, and Sarah's neighbors from East London. As Sarah walked down the aisle, she thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that love and hard work could overcome any obstacle. She thought about the young woman who had left a note in a palace kitchen 3 years earlier, terrified of reaching for something that seemed impossible. But, mostly, she looked at Louis, waiting for her at the altar with tears in his eyes and a smile that told her everything she needed to know about their future together. The Archbishop of Canterbury spoke about love that serves others, about two people who had found in each other not just personal happiness but a shared mission to make the world better. When Louis and Sarah exchanged vows, promising to support each other's work and to use their partnership in service of others, there wasn't a dry eye in the abbey. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, both knew that their real work was just beginning. They had each other, they had the support of their families, and they had a clear vision of the life they wanted to build together. The room that had fallen quiet when Prince Louis first bowed his head in the palace kitchen all those years ago was now filled with celebration. Even the king, watching his son's obvious joy, had no words adequate to express his pride in the man Louis had become and the woman who had helped him find his way. Their love story had begun with bread and conversation in a kitchen before dawn. It continued with a shared commitment to service, to seeing the dignity and potential in every person they met. And now it would unfold on a larger stage, but always grounded in the simple truth that had brought them together, that the best kind of love makes both people better, and the best kind of life serves something greater than itself.